8:30. Call this meeting to order. We'll start. Lori.
Okay, good afternoon. This is RCEA Board Clerk Lori Taketa with today's housekeeping announcements. For those of you who are new to RCEA's meetings here at the Warfinger Building, we keep the microphones on throughout the meeting. They do not get turned off. So please speak one person at a time, speak clearly. If you can remember to say your name when you start talking, that helps people who are watching and they can follow better. So for community members who might be speaking during the public comment periods and staff who are reporting to the board, we ask that you come up to the microphone so that the microphone picks up your voice. So online participants, click the raise hand button in the webinar controls. Phone participants, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And if you can raise your hand early, that's great because then we won't miss you and we'll remember to call on you. Public comment may be limited to 3 minutes at the chair's discretion. Emailed comments are being accepted at publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org until the chair closes the public comment period for that agenda item. And people who are participating remotely, if you are experiencing internet interruptions, and if your meeting connection is disrupted, please let us know if you can by calling or texting 707-613-0622 or by emailing publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. And that's it. Let me just do a quick check. We're okay.
Yeah, there might be some sound issues, but let's also look into the discretion of the board if you want to technically achieve that little Windows noise.
The beeping.
It's fine.
All right, sure.
I guess I should have said, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Today, February 27, 2025, meeting of RCEA Board of Directors. We're calling it to order, and may we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Chair. Chair Bauer.
Here.
Director Raj.
Here.
Director
Here.
Director Kelly. Here. Director Cheryl King from Trinidad. Kelly from Trinidad.
Here, sorry.
Jerry King from Fortuna is absent. Director Heidi Moore Gaina from Blue Lake Rancheria.
Present.
Director Elise Scafani. Here. Director Sarah Schaefer.
Here.
Director Frank Wilson.
Here.
Vice Chair Wu is absent. Director Mike Wilson from the county.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, and no remote direct participation, so. All right, we'll start with item 2, reports from member entities. If anybody would like to report? Like it? Okay. Oral and written communications, item 3. This time is provided for people to address the board or submit written communication on matters not on the agenda. At the conclusion of all oral communications, the board may respond to statements. Any request that requires board action will be set by the board for the future agenda or referring to staff.
You did receive one written email comment from Mr. Rory Howard from Fortuna, and that was available on RCEA Plus.
Thank you, Lori. And does anybody want to speak, right? We're talking about anybody in the audience want to talk about something not on the agenda? No, anyone online?
Nothing online.
Okay, well, we'll move on then to the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered routine by the board and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. End of the reading of the consent calendar, board members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. Does anyone from the board want to pull an item? Okay. Anyone from the public here in the building? No.
Nothing online.
And nothing online? All right. So do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Confirm that was Director Schaefer and Director Moore found that.
Yes. Yeah, raise all in favor, say aye, or raise your hand, sorry.
Motion passes.
All right. Moving right along. I do need to confirm with community choice energy business. There is a quorum. Item 6 is old, the CCE business, and we're going to talk about item 6.1, energy risk management semi-annual report. It's like, Lori, what are we talking? Excellent. Thank you.
I'm Lori Bandy. I'm the Director of Business Planning and Finance for the Redwood Energy Authority. And I'm going to start out presenting the Energy Risk Management Semi-Annual Report and then pass it to Richard, our Director of Power Resources. So first we wanted to talk about a little bit of change to the way that we present the risk management update to the board. First, we are changing the timing. So we're going from a quarterly timing to a semi-annual timing of our presentation. This was updated in the risk management policy that you guys approved in December. And it's meant to be in alignment with our annual budget setting and our mid-year budget review. So those are the 2 points in time when we make decisions with this information. And having the quarterly presentations seem to just kind of unnecessarily confuse sometimes. So today, the information that we're presenting today's semi-annual report will be changes in reference to what we presented in May of 2024 when we were preparing the fiscal year 24-25 budget. To that end, we're also asking our consultants at Energy Authority to help us shift a focus to fiscal year over calendar year. So the numbers that we're presenting will be on a fiscal year basis. And we have made that change today, but we'll show you both. And then we're also, as I mentioned, we're going to look at numbers against the most recent adopted or revised budget instead of the previous quarter's financial modeling. So today's numbers we'll talk about in relation to May 2024. And then we are also looking to change how we're presenting the cost of short-term renewable and carbon-free procurement. So the way that that has been presented is as one annual lump sum payment because that's how we pay for those products. But we would like to show them as we accrue them, so over a monthly basis. It'll basically just kind of even out. So instead of having these spikes, we'll show that that cost is being accrued over the full year. Also, as you see, we're co-presenting with PEA staff. So I'm up here and then Richard will be up here too. And we are generally interested in any board input on further changes because we know that this is really complicated information. And so anything that they want to tell us, it would be helpful with these presentations as well. Okay, so we'll get into it. Oh, I'm also supposed to mention that we will be having a more in-depth affordability discussion coming in April. So Beth will reach out about that. Alright. So the two main drivers of the changes in our financial forecasts are CCE revenues and net power costs. So for fiscal year 2024-25, we have seen our electricity sales revenue be higher than what we budgeted. And the main driver of that is that the calendar year 2025 rate increase was higher than what we thought it would be in May. And I also mentioned that the PCIA, which of course is part of our rates, was lower than what we thought it would be. So for calendar year 26 and 27, our rate forecasts were updated as well. And that resulted in $10.2 million more CCE revenues in fiscal year 25-26, and 4.5 million less in fiscal year 26-27 from what we had forecasted in May of 2024. For net power costs, for calendar year 2025, our costs were down 22% than what we thought they would be. And we are 100% hedged for calendar year 2025. And as a reminder, hedge means that we have procured all the power that we think we're going to need for calendar year 2025. So that's locked in, and it's 22% cheaper than we thought it would be. For calendar years 26 and 27, costs are down 22% and 7%, and those are forecasted costs, but we are also hedged for those years about 70%, respectively. So that's good for us. And then as a note, as a reminder, folks, that our Dreamy Solar project has come online, and so that's one of the reasons why we are so well prepared for the upcoming years. Got lots of power. And then we also see decreased prices forecasted for our renewable energy credits, our carbon-free power, and resource adequacy credits that we buy. Showing updated revenue forecasts in comparison to our May forecast. So what we see in May is our, net CCE revenue forecast that was informed our budget, our current fiscal year 24-25 budget, and then what we are presenting to you now for these fiscal years. As you can see, it is increased. And then we included a calendar year slide in here as well. I like this because it shows the very large swing that we were looking at based on rate increases. So rate changes at PG&E level change calendar year by the calendar year. And so we see very big swings in our efforts to go to more of a fiscal year focus. We'll see that these will even out more across the years, because we'll be experiencing these swings only half of the year in a fiscal year. So this is the changes in our 2-year cash projection. We see a huge improvement, and it has basically our 2-year cash projection has improved due to the projected increase of CCE net revenues that I just showed y'all. Yeah, and I guess another note about changing, our how we present our environmental costs from just one lump sum to trying to show how we accrue it over the year will help even this out as well. So you see these dips where we were making large purchases, and instead we'll just kind of have a lower overall balance there.
Lori, thank you. So I'm Richard Engel, Director of Power Resources, and Lori and I are splitting up this presentation. The stuff I'm going to talk about just dives a little bit deeper into some of the drivers that Lori was describing that determine our costs and revenues. This graph shows over time the projections for the PG&E's generation rate, which we set our rates relative to. As you know, we have a 0.5% discount relative to PG&E rates for current direction from the board. So we're always floating our rates a little below this, but we also have to take into account the PCIA, the power charge and difference adjustment. So just as a reminder, the PCIA is the charge that PG&E assesses on their part of the bill to unbundled customers like CCA customers, and that's meant to make them whole for costs that they incurred, committed themselves to without anticipating losing customers to other load serving entities like a CCA like us. The math is basically, because of that 0.5% discount, that if you take PG&E's generation rate and multiply that by 99.5%, that needs to be equal to whatever we're charging our customers plus the PCIA. So as you can see, there are trends up and down like we typically show, and there's, summer rates go up and winter rates go down. So that kind of explains the stair steps up and down the PG&E rates. The solid lines are, the current projections for these. So for the coming year, 2025, the generation rate for PG&E is substantially higher than what was being projected before. So that translates into more revenue for RCEA. And then the PCIA has gone down, and that also actually is good for RCEA's finances because it gives us a little more breathing room in terms of how much of the rate relative to PG&E we're able to recover through our own rates. And the PCIA actually steps down more over time, and to where it actually is projected to go a little bit negative going into 2027, and that has happened before. So it's a number that can actually be negative, which just means that the market value of power is actually a little bit higher relative to PG&E's current costs. So their resources are in the black when the PCIA is negative. So what that means. And the generation rate in 2026 is actually a little, it's projected to be a little bit lower. So that, drives down our financial position a little bit in 2026. And then in 2027, it goes back to being just about the same as what was projected back in February. Forward energy prices are what you would pay today for energy that you want to have delivered at any of these dates in the future. And this, you can see, has a real annual rhythm to it, sort of the two-humped camel, where there's in each year, there's typically a summer price spike that kind of corresponds to when summer cooling loads are at a peak, and that's putting a strain on the grid, and prices reflect that. And then in the winter time, heating loads similarly drive prices up seasonally. So there's those kind of two spikes. The really good news here is that the solid lines, the blue and orange solid line, which are the current forward prices, are much lower than they were. So to the extent that we have hedging that we have yet to do, this bodes well for being able to do those hedges at better prices than we would have if we bought that power, last year. So good news in power markets right now. The difference between the blue line and the red line is that there's two different kind of time periods. With one being on peak means basically daytimes Monday through Saturday, and then off peak is night times and Sundays, when typically loads are a bit lower. So in both cases, you can see that those have trended better with time. One other thing that we've added here is starting a few months ago, with just seeing what had happened with customer debt during the pandemic, we decided in our monthly internal risk updates that we do with TEA staff, we thought it would be valuable to really start keeping an eye on what's going on with customer debt. So there are three categories of customer debt that we have to concern ourselves with. One category, which is what's shown here, is active debt status. So by active debt, we mean customers who are still being served by RCEA who owe us money for unpaid bills. Those numbers have fortunately trended down over time. Part of that is the good news that we're just seeing, post-pandemic, that we're having customers not having quite as much difficulty as they were a couple of years ago paying their bills. So we're not accumulating new debt at the rate that we were. The other thing that's happening is just that there's a 4-year statute of limitations on being able to go and pursue customer debt. So we have some of that debt aging out that we just can't pursue anymore. So some of that's not money that's actually accruing to us through customer payments. There's a second category, which is customers who have been delinquent on their bill payments for so long that we've chosen not to serve them anymore and have returned them back to bundled service with PG&E for our policies that we have on that. And then a third category is customers who have completely closed their accounts. They're no longer being served by PG&E and have, unpaid debt that they owe to both PG&E and to us. And what eventually happens there is PG&E, once the account is closed, they take whatever customer debt that was owed to us, and they shift that back over to us. And they say, okay, from now on, this customer is not a PG&E customer anymore. So collecting any RCEA debt is RCEA's problem. And so, with board approval, we've gone out and contracted with a collection agency that pursues that debt for us. So those are three different categories of debt. Regarding advancing here. Can you advance for me, please? Thanks. So this is that debt that's been assigned to collection agencies, and that has we've progressively assigned more debt to the collection agency. We've had limited success in recovering it. To date, we've only gotten 1.8% of the debt that was assigned, which sounds really terrible, but we have checked in with the other CCAs on that, and it's very typical. We're hearing anywhere from 1 to 3% is what other CCAs have been able to collect. So we're kind of right in the typical range on that. We don't pay a fee to the agency that's collecting the debt for us. They just keep the percentage of what they're able to collect. At this point, all of this uncollected revenues debt is still on our books, and it's just reflected in total accounts receivable minus the bad debt estimate that's on our monthly financial reports. And just to give you a sense of all, I actually don't have a graph on that kind of second category that I mentioned, the accounts that we're no longer serving that are still PG&E customers. But I can just tell you at the end of Q4 of 2024, just to give a sense of those three categories, active account debt was at $1.7 million. The dropped accounts that have been returned to PG&E were about $600,000, and the closed accounts, as you can see, were at like $5.6 million at the end of the year. So total among those three categories, about $7.9 million in outstanding debt. And that's the end of our business or of our presentation. If I have any questions for lawyers. Thank you.
Sure.
Cheryl Kelly, Trinidad. I just had a quick question. I thought I read in here that the program related expenses, there was some upside. I think it was 5.55 million and the original forecast was 50,000. Revenue from program related.
We're gonna discuss that in the next agenda item.
Okay. Hold for that. My second question was just about a little bit more about the uncollected receivables. So the allowance for doubtful accounts is 9.8 million. And I just wanted to make sure I understood that there's a percentage of that is in this. Is that just a set aside or is that actual uncollected debt?
Yeah, that's an estimate.
An
So,
estimate, okay.
yep, every time we calculate our energy revenue, we also estimate an uncollected amount, and right now it's at 3%. But it does change based on what we're actually seeing, and so from year to year, we change it and.
Okay, well, overall, it's, revenue is on the upside, so that's really helpful. Yes, some of those expenses.
It's really helpful if people get it.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the board? I have a question. I'm just curious on the predictions, PG&E predictions for 2 years. I'm sure you told us this before, but are they looking at just like prices and weather? Like, how do you predict 2 years out for energy use? That blows my mind.
Well, for the use, you mean like how much will the customers consume?
Well, I mean, the price, right?
Yeah.
And how do
Right.
you do it?
They're looking at those same forward price curves or similar ones to the ones that PEA provides us. So I think they have really similar intel to what we have. Jacqueline, I don't know if you have anything you could add on how the IOUs do this cost forecasting.
Sure, come up to the microphone. So the price curves that you see aren't just forecasts, they're actually what power is being traded for delivery at that time period. So when you see, 2026 power price, it's actually, I will buy that now and you will deliver it to me in that time period, for this great complex.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. No other questions to the, let's see here. And anybody from the public? Where we're at? Public comment, anybody here in their building? No? Anyone online?
Nothing online.
All right,
I just want to mention for the record that Jacqueline Har from the Energy Authority was the last person that spoke at the podium. Lori indicated as that we identify ourselves. So.
thank you, appreciate it. All right, we just accepting the report, so there's no, right?
It doesn't, but I don't know quite frankly what you normally do for this, do you know, Richard? Is it normally accepted by motion? It's not.
I believe there has been a motion and vote to accept the report.
I'll make a motion to accept and file the report.
Get that. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. Yeah. All right. Thank you. New CC business, we don't have any. I guess we'll end community choice energy business. We are not gonna take a break. We'll move on to number 9, new business. And it's the fiscal year 24-25 mid-year budget adjustment. I think you can put this in Lori or you?
Yeah. Is it okay if I sit here? I know I can't see any of you. Would you like me to? I'll come up. I've never sat that close to the pillar and now I know what you all are complaining about. My apologies. Next slide, please. We're looking at a mid-year budget adjustment. When we adopted the budget in June 2024, our financial outlook was not looking well. So we adopted a budget with some pretty extreme budget measures in an attempt to balance the budget. And so what I just wanted to kind of do a look back in time of what we did in what was adopted in the current budget. So we made the tough decision to pause our procurement goals. And so the board adopted a resolution to procure to the state's renewable energy RPS goals for the remainder of calendar year 2024 and all of calendar year 2025. RCEA's goal was 100% renewable and carbon free. The state's RPS standard is at 47%. So it was a big change at that time, and it was an estimated savings of about $4 million. We froze all vacant positions, which was a cost saving measure of about $467,000. We had done a solicitation for architectural and engineering design for a building. Based on the proposals we got, we were estimating about a $1.2 million cost. We paused that. We decreased our customer rebate and incentive budget by about half, which was a $170,000 reduction. And then we reduced our communications and outreach budget by $45,000. And then the board had asked staff to bring forward a third-party compensation and classification review, and we paused that as well. So just an overview, and I'll get into more detail, but just like, don't want to keep you on the hook of like where we're looking at. So a summary of our proposed update, and this was brought to the Finance Subcommittee February 6th. So taking into account all the proposed changes we're making, we're looking at an increase of our revenue from about 70 million to 95 million. Our expenses are increasing from 72 million to 81 million, but the bottom line is we're looking at our projected net revenue going from 1.8 million to 13.8 million by the end of this fiscal year. And so kind of what I'm going to go through are the main drivers and the main changes that we're proposing. The three kind of big ticket items are the CPUC's approval of the Northern Rural Energy Network, reinstating budget measures that we brought forward to the board when we adopted the budget, and then the changes that they just mentioned in the last presentation of electricity sales and costs, wholesale power supply costs. So we were finally approved for the Northern Rural Energy Network. We're kind of rebranding the name. So it doesn't roll off the tongue quite yet. We just used to say Rural Ren, but now our nickname is NREN. So the CPUC approved NREN, and we were allowed to start billing from September 2024. It's a 4-year program. It'll go through 2027. The total allocation is $33.1 million. And we're going to have a more in-depth discussion at a later date to kind of reorient the board of what this program is and the programs that will be offered here in Humboldt County through NREN. But these funds are for energy efficiency programs. We partnered with 3 other organizations, Sierra Business Council, Lake Area Planning Council, and Mendocino Council of Governments to offer these programs. So all these program dollars aren't coming just to Humboldt County, but RCEA is the portfolio administrator. So we have our administrative costs and also programmatic costs to offer energy efficiency programs in Humboldt County. Those of you who have been on this roller coaster with us, it didn't feel real until we have now received 2 quarterly payments. Each payment's a little over $2 million from PG&E. So we actually have money in the bank for this program now. So for what that means for this fiscal year is an additional revenue and expense of about $7.1 million. These expenses include personnel, database development, marketing and outreach, customer programs, rebates, and then pass through program funding to our partners. So we collect all the money and then we pass it out to our program partners. Some of this funding offsets money that we adopted in our budget because it can now be covered through the REN. So this offsets about $931,000 of our adopted budget expenses. Next slide.
Do you have an indirect cost rate or administrative fee that you get to keep this pass-through?
Yes, ma'am. So the next item is reinstating some of the budget measures that we took out in an attempt to balance the budget. So we reinstated our travel and training budget. We unfroze the vacant positions. Some of those the board has already unfroze. They made the decision to unfreeze them in anticipation of the CPUC approving the REN. Reinstating the communication and outreach budget, funding a compensation and classification study, which we're under contract for currently and are starting that work now. Increasing our electrical vehicle rebate by $50,000, funding additional audits and our financial software, and then funding IT hardware replacements and software, and then adding funds to do a cost of service rate analysis. Next slide. So I won't go too in-depth because I think the risk report really covered the drivers for what the electricity sales and power supply are doing to our budget and, you know, the need for this budget adjustment. But some high level items of note, and one to your question, Director Kelly, is just there's some additional items besides just the rates. So what we're presenting here, we talked about, we use the financial model to estimate what we believe our revenue and expenses are going to be associated with electricity sales. And so we use a model as of January 31st. We're still assuming the rate discount of 0.5% below PG&E rates. Our revenue is expected at 12.3 million more, and our supply expenses are 3.7 more. And then the big one is that, and we don't book delay damages until we receive them. And so we didn't include delay damages from Sandrini in our adopted budget. We have now received about 5.8 million in construction delay damages. So that's part of needing a budget adjustment. And then we're reporting on this per board direction, you know, when the board made the decision to accept the Diablo Canyon allocation and sell hydro in an equivalent amount, they asked for staff to bring back what that amount is, and it's estimated at around 300,000. It's based on the water actually flowing, so it could be a little less or it could be a little bit more, but it's going to be roughly 300,000. So in keeping with board direction, when we made these tough decisions adopting the budget, they asked for us to, at mid-year, also look back at revisiting our clean energy goals and the pause that was adopted in passing this budget. So again, we're, you know, temporarily reduced our renewable energy targets. And so we presented these 3 scenarios to the finance committee earlier this month. I will say before I kind of get into, I always forget to look at my notes. Before I get into the actual scenarios, I will say that these amounts have been updated with real-time estimates. So the amount in item 1 and item 3 have changed from what was presented to the subcommittee and what was in the staff report, and I'll get into that. So item 1 was, or item scenario 1 is to stay with the current procurement strategy of meeting the state renewable portfolio standard, and then sell any excess energy that RCEA has procured beyond that goal, which, as I mentioned before, is 47%. You know, in the last report, they mentioned we're 100% hedged and procured. We've procured more than 47% to date. So the estimate of selling that excess at the time of writing the staff report was 4 million. As you know, we all learned the market is volatile. Now that estimate is 2.9 million. So we just want to make sure you have the up-to-date numbers when you're making decisions. Scenario 2 was keeping the board procurement strategy, but then keeping any excess procurement in our portfolio. So not changing to 100%, but not doing any additional procurement, but not selling any excess. So it's cost neutral, and based on what we have procured to date, we're looking at about 82% renewable and carbon free for the year for 2025. And then scenario 3 is to just reinstate the 100% by 2025 and have 100% renewable and carbon free. Again, when we asked for these estimates for the staff report and presented the committee, it was 1.6 million in additional cost. Now it's 2.3 million. The committee and staff and the Energy Authority all are recommending scenario 2. The reason for that is in scenario 1, you know, there's no room for error. If our load was to increase, we could get caught under procuring based on the state standards and face penalties. Scenario 3, when what we're procuring to meet that 100% is large hydro. Large hydro that we just sold and now costs more than what we sold. And we're not really moving the needle in the state's renewable development. And so, you know, we're still taking a fiscally conservative approach, and you know, the money that we could save in not procuring that large hydro can go into meeting our reserve policy. And then once we meet, you know, those goals, you know, the board has discretion on using those funds for future developments or rate relief to customers. And then next slide. So we wanted to get a little bit more into what the customer, that 82%, what that means and what that's gonna look like on our to our customer when they get their power content label. So I'm gonna give it over to Richard to co-present with me on the next couple slides.
Thanks, Eileen. Okay, Richard Engel, again, Director of Power Resources. This is just kind of breaking things down a little bit from some of the numbers that you saw in the previous slide. And the proposal here is to restore the trajectory toward hitting 100% renewable by 2030. And so over the years, we've been showing the board kind of a straight line trajectory to get there, increasing our renewables year by year. And so if we were to jump on that now, we're looking at 75% of our portfolio for the current year being renewable energy and 82% of it being carbon free. Now let's just take a sec to revisit those terms. Renewable energy is what's defined by the state under their renewable portfolio standard. So that includes the renewable resources we're familiar with, you know, solar, geothermal, wind energy, wave energy, things like that. Biomass also, which we have some within our portfolio. And carbon-free resources are things that are not in that renewable category, but are free of carbon emissions. And for our history, as a load-serving entity, that is not large hydropower, which is not considered renewable. Another category of carbon-free energy is nuclear. And in general, you know, RCEA has a prohibition on procuring nuclear power, but of course, as you know, the board did opt to accept the allocation that they're offered. So, so the carbon-free portion here will be a blend of nuclear and large hydropower. Breaking it down a little further, you'll see the renewables come in 2 different categories. One is what's called bundled renewables, which has historically been what we've procured for RCEA, but there's this other category, unbundled renewables, and with the board's approval, we did enter into some procurement of unbundled renewables. That's why you see some of that showing up in there. Just one footnote on these numbers is that there's a policy change that's happened recently, whereas historically the percent renewables has been calculated by dividing your renewable procurement by your retail load, what actually makes it to the customer. And under new policy, that calculation is going to be renewables divided by your wholesale procurement. So that's before the, you know, transmission and distribution losses that happen in getting that power to the customer. So that will make a given amount of renewables procurement will look as a smaller percentage under that new methodology. So that's just to be taken into account that the actual percent renewable under that policy change will end up looking a bit smaller than this. So just to go a little bit deeper into that subject of bundled versus unbundled renewables, there's basically 4 different categories of Oh, I wanted to touch on one other thing before I proceed with this slide. I just meant to mention this. Which is, I just wanted to remind you that there's two board goals that we've been focusing on for the last several years. And I just wanted to remind you what those are. One of them was by this year to hit where 100% of our energy portfolio would be a blend of renewables and carbon-free resources. We just talked about those. So under this proposal, we're not at 100%, but 82% is where we would land. So it's much closer to that goal than where we were headed with the downward adjustment that we made last summer. The other goal that we have is 100% local renewable energy by 2030. So that would mean that by 2030, we plan to have phased out the carbon-free resources and just be getting all of our energy from state certified renewable resources. So the unbundled RECs, because this is something new that our customers have not seen showing up on the power content label postcard that gets mailed out once a year, but they're going to start seeing that now. So I just wanted to familiarize you with how this works. Since we've never had this unbundled REC ingredient in our power content label before, I had to look elsewhere to show you an example of what this looks like. So in 2023, PG&E did have these unbundled RECs or renewable energy certificates as part of their portfolio. So the eligible renewables up at the top of the table there includes three categories of renewables that are all referred to as PCC, which means portfolio content category. And those are 0, 1, and 2. These are all what are called bundled renewables. And by bundled, we mean that the energy and the renewable energy certificates are sold together to the same customer. They don't get separated. Under the case of the category 3 RECs, the RECs can be sold to a different customer and delivered to a different customer than where the energy actually goes. So the category 1 is what we have historically been mostly procuring. Early on in the first few years, we would also procure some category 2. Category 1 are renewables that are generally procured in-state. Category 2 are ones that are typically procured from out of state. And category 0 is kind of this strange animal that's just basically legacy old renewable resources that came online before around 2010 when the renewable portfolio standard came into being. So you'll see some, and some of the allocation of renewables that we get through the voluntary allocation program at PG&E come from that category 0. So we've had historically some 0, 1, and 2 all in our portfolio, and all of those get bundled together on the power content label under what's called eligible renewables there. So that's the 32.8% you see for PG&E. The unbundled RECs are shown separately because of that difference about how the energy is being delivered to a different customer than the certificate. So in this case, PG&E procured the certificates, but not actually buy the power. I can give you one example that shows that you can actually have these different categories come from the same generator, which is we get the category 1 RECs from our biomass contracts with Humboldt Sawmill Company. Now, a couple of years ago, Humboldt Sawmill Company made a proposal to also sell us some category 3 RECs because they have electricity they generate on site and use in their own sawmill. And they're able to sell the renewable energy certificates associated with that to a different party. And they offered them to us. We brought that up with the board. The board declined to pursue that. But had the board approved that, we could actually be buying category 1 and 3 for the very same generator, just under these different arrangements. If the board is in agreement with the recommendation from the finance committee, what we would expect to see would be on power content label for 2025, when that comes out, would be 62% eligible renewables plus 13% unbundled RECs, equaling that 75% total renewables that we looked at on the earlier slide. Just want you to be aware of this because the fact is there won't be any place on the power content label that actually says 75%. You have to do that little bit of math. And, I think that is what I wanted to cover on this, so I'll hand you back to Mike.
Next slide. So what we presented in the packet and what an overview that I have here includes adding back in those budget measures, adding in the revenue and associated expenses with the Northern Rural Energy Network and the scenario 2 proposal that we have listed. So what that means overall per kind of category, and it's in more detail in your packet, is that we would increase, the adjustment would be that we increase electricity sales to 82.9 million. We increase our grants and contracts revenue from 1.8 to 9 million. Again, the bulk of this is the REN. We would increase our program related service fees from 50,000 to 5.9. 5.8 of that is the delay damages from Sandrini. Next slide.
Does any of the grants include grants that are currently being negotiated?
That's a good point. I meant to mention that, and we'll talk a little bit about tariffs in the federal update, but we did not include any expenses or revenue associated with the Tribal Energy Resilience and Sovereignty funding from the Department of Energy because it's on pause. We did include, we received funding through the Shots Energy Research Center to pay for an accountant and legal services associated with negotiating the DOE award, and those that associated revenue and expenses counted, which the total of that is 80,000, but we didn't. If when we get unstuck, we will come back to you with great news and another budget adjustment. So our expense adjustments are increasing our wholesale power supply cost to 64.7 million, increasing our personnel cost to 5.4 million. That category, this is kind of collapsed in. It includes our travel and training, and it also includes the class and comp study and unfreezing the vacant positions. Increasing our facilities and operations. Again, the bulk of this is accounting for workstations and just office equipment associated with staff for the REN. Increasing our communications and outreach budget. Professional and program services from 4.4 to 8.9. Again, this is these big, large contracts with our partners for REN and pass-through funds, and then our own contracts that we're entering into to administer and implement. And the next one is exciting. So the incentives and rebates, we're increasing our budget from 230,000 to 965. So that's the actual money that is infused from the REN that will go into our community. So of that increase, only 50,000 is not, of the increase, only 50,000 isn't funded through the REN. And then our non-operating costs are staying the same. So just to try to wrap it all up, we anticipated a reduction of the reserve fund this fiscal year of 1.8 million. The proposed mid-year adjustment estimates now a net revenue of 13.8. We just brought to the board a reserve policy that was adopted. This reserve policy outlined that our target reserve is 180 days cash on hand. So based on this budget presented to you, that's roughly 36.2 million. As of February 20th, our cash balance was 31.9 million. So we are on target to reach our reserve goal. If not this fiscal year, early into next fiscal year. So our next steps is, we're looking at doing a, cost of service, rate, setting analysis that we'll be bringing back to the board. And then the reserve policy states that once the reserve goal is reached and maintained, so, you know, it's important. When you see the volatility and kind of the up and down, we need to not only meet that goal, but we need to know that we've maintained it for 12 months, and then we'll start to develop options for the board to make decisions on utilizing funds that exceed that reserve goal. Some of the things that we talked about with the board in the past is bringing back a dividend program so that if we exceed our goals, we can start to put bill credits on customer bills. We can look at rate changes, and then we can also discuss other programs that we can fund out of those. And that's it. Any questions?
Yes, I have a quick one. Cheryl Kelly, Trinidad. The cash position is favorable at 31.9 million, and you may have just answered my question, which was, does RCEA ever consider investing those funds for return, or is it returned in the form of rebates and savings to the customers? I'm not really sure how that works.
So maybe, I think I heard two questions. Do we invest that cash?
Yes.
We have an investment policy, and we're looking at, in exploring investing some of that, money. You know, this is a new, opportunity for us.
Okay.
It wasn't that long ago that we were, taking out loans, from our friends and neighbors, including Blue Lake Rancheria, just to have, cash available, to meet our expenses.
I see.
So we're getting there. And then, yes, I mean, within the budget, we build in, programs, incentives, to invest, revenue generated, through rates back into the community.
Thank you.
I'll just add a comment. First of all, thank you, because there's not a lot of questions, because it was really clear and very well put together, and just thank you to the subcommittee as well for, you know, taking this on and helping make some recommendations. But I would, you know, I know as we're looking at cost of service, it's gonna come up and we're gonna see, but just how the swings happen, because I know that like all of us were like, oh God, this is the worst budget in years and everything looked really horrible, and now we're seeing, you know, this $13 million increase. And so again, I'm just looking at opportunities to be able to pass some of these savings on to customers, and cost of service might do that at least at some times of the year. But again, and I'm sure we all hear it, but it's really nice that we have you know, an upswing in our budget, but that's because of how awful PG&E's rates are, and how, you know, that stranglehold that they have on customers to provide that service. And so you know, just as we look into cost of service and as we move forward, looking at more opportunities to be able to bring slightly more significant savings to our customers and really incentivize that participation in RCEA, because you see, you know, I've sat with many folks and explained to them, actually, no, it doesn't really cost more, and here's why. And you know, all of these various things where you see posts on Facebook with people being like, yeah, no, opt out of it. It's, no, wait, hold on. But you know, to look at some people actually can see that and say, oh yeah, this is a savings. And I like RCEA for that reason. To be able to try to start moving in that direction. But thank you, Eileen, and thank you, you know, everybody, staff and subcommittee.
And you know, to that Beth, I was like, I do direct Beth wants to bring back an affordability workshop, so where we can really spend the time to dive in, so that you have the language and the tools to help your constituents that have those questions.
That's nice.
And we're really interested in looking at providing more relief, so we do kind of divest a little bit from PG&E's rates and it looks more noticeable. I think with Sandrini coming online, you know, and as we can get more long-term contracts, we're hoping to levelize the swings so that, you know, we're not looking at 3 years of negative net revenue in May and then in February, you know, a giant swing to positive.
Go ahead.
This is Katie Morgan. So you talked about the investment portfolio potential. I have served, I'm not currently on it, but I've served on the Cal Poly Humboldt Foundation Finance Committee. And we have generated significant increased revenue as a result of some really sound investments with a heavy emphasis on ESG. So that's another way that this group can kind of assert its position around investing in renewables, and it's been a very, very successful package. Now, I will say that ESG also includes technology, so we'd probably be including things such as AI investments, but and then also the Blue Lake Rancheria, we have a foundation and we use actually the same investment firm, they're called RBK. And it's just been a wonderful experience for 6 years with like a lot of return on investment. So you build up your reserve, you maintain it for 12 months, you gain another $4.5 million that you then can apply to some of those ratepayer adjustment and incentives.
I'll just say, to Director Schaefer, or Scott Bauer, City of Eureka, you know, the finance committee, we're all, you know, we talked a lot about, you know, wanting to get back to the 1%, you know, trying to, but the realization of trying to get to a stable level of rainy day fund, you know, 180 days, it's like that balance is so hard, you know, we want more renewables, long-term contract, long-term procurement is how we do it, right? And we're trying to get to that point where we're not dealing with fluctuations of the market and all that. So yeah, we talked a lot about it. But I'll say this too, I just got back from League of California Cities meeting, I serve on the board of directors. And there's a lot of talk about power. I mean, we talked about PG&E and Southern California Edison, and what are we gonna do? You know, especially when PG&E shows record profits and all of that. So there'll be a lot more, I think, at the legislative state trying to figure that out, because we all hear from our constituents about prices, you know, energy prices, and how do we survive from a fixed income? I don't know how you do it. But I think we're on the right path, as far as a sustainable future, and hopefully we can bring back, you know, rebates and credits and all those things. So I appreciate what staff has done to try and, you know, thread the needle on this one until we can get to a point where we're set for 12 months.
If I could, I'll go on Michael Girache, Yurok Tribe, and a representative, and you know, to have that extra money is what is really exciting. You know, it's fun to talk about. I think the investment concept is a very sound one to protect against some of the volatility that we've seen in the past. The credits and rebates also very exciting, but it also, I just wanted to quickly plug for the other incentives, especially the programs that RCEA has run, and in light of the fact that, you know, things like net metering and other programs designed to incentivize home generation, you know, has been rolled back. And so we can do something here with locally through RCEA that, you know, incorporates those benefits to customers, but also a long-term picture of resiliency within the region through these extra dollars. And so it's, again, I would encourage, us to continuing that conversation about exactly, what benefits come from the distribution of these, of this money, so, but overall, it's really exciting, so, thanks.
Director Wilson?
Sorry, I mean, since we're on this roll, which is not what I was expecting, in the past, there is, just before COVID, there was a time when this organization was considering the idea of bonds and bond structure to create a financing arm, which then would be investing directly into renewables with a payback from the investments directly into local renewable and energy efficiency projects. And maybe it's a time to be thinking about that again, because you can invest in other companies, or you can also invest in your community too. And I think, it's a hybridized version of what we're talking about here. And I just wanted, since I'm only here very seldomly, if there's a time when you guys are considering this, I'd like to just putting those concepts of a resiliency bond, the local resiliency bond, back on the discussion space.
I like the idea, I mean, and I think RCEA is moving in that direction in several ways. One of them is through its participation in Paris. It's not the bond program, it's grant, but oftentimes at the UROC tribe, we'll get a lot of investment offers. People come, they want to work with you to build, but then later own the infrastructure. And it's every single time so far, it's been after we've investigated a no, due to the amount of control you lose, and then you start to break down where the money goes, and then it's not going to us. So but there's a need for that investment. And so, especially when we see the volatility surrounding the new administration and whether our terrorist funds are actually going to come through. So for a local partner, such as this one, where you have this diverse representative body and a potential mandate to, prioritize goals beyond generating profits for the investing company, it's a very exciting one. And I think that overall, it fits with the picture of Humboldt that a lot of people have, which could potentially be based on, this kind of development, and on one hand, and restoration on the other.
I just wanted to flag for the group that on May 22nd, members from CPUC are going to be coming to the Blue Lake Rancheria. They're hosting a transmission right-of-way workshop. Anyway, it's not appropriate for me to make it available to the public, but I do think that it's appropriate to make it available to a couple select staff from RCEA, as we're going to have a really unique one-to-one opportunity. Michael will be there presumably, and other tribal nations. But when we talk about advocacy with CPUC, it's always best that you can engage them personally. The likelihood that they'll go back and exercise work on your behalf is increased. So just an opportunity that's coming up here in the near future.
No, I think we're all probably pretty good. I totally support these, bonds and working through that, and just to be aware that the feds are talking about getting rid of tax-free municipal bonds. That's part of the, the savings they're trying to achieve. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but that is the talk, and our city of Eureka, we're trying to hurry and get some bonds in place before that happens, but hopefully it doesn't happen, because that would be pretty hard for a lot of us to use those things to finance good projects. Right, you want to go out to the public? Does anybody, anybody online? All right, do we have a motion, motion to approve the proposed changes to the RCEA fiscal year 2024-25? budget.
I'm looking.
I'll second.
Yes. Yes. Do we have a hand vote or a roll call? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. All right, thank you. Thank you. Next is new business 9.2 federal activity update.
Hi, Kate Carlton, Regulatory and Legislative Policy Manager for RCEA. Flower, all right. Okay, I'm just gonna start by giving credit to this photo of the White House from Architectural Digest. I thought it was a really beautiful one. Wanted to include it. Start with something scenic. So you all know that very much has happened since President Trump's inauguration. And there's been a flurry of executive orders and presidential memos, many of which affect the energy sector and state and local governments. So the goal of this report is to give you a broad overview of the general trend of these presidential actions and get your guidance on how to engage both with you all on federal issues and how to engage with the federal government on your behalf. I want to note before I dive into things that our RCEA does not receive any federal funding for day-to-day operations. And this report is going to focus on presidential action, executive actions, so that's executive orders, presidential memos, proclamations. And it's not going to go into appointments, nominations, or results, any reasons. Okay. So related to energy and the environment, and this first bullet covers more than just energy and environment. There's a recession of the past administrations, the Biden administration's presidential actions to start. Over 70 were rescinded. And then there were a flurry of new orders and memos related to energy and environment, specifically to unleash American energy, declare a national energy emergency, to lower cost of living, pause new offshore wind leases, and investigate the potential to rescind or pause existing wind leases, develop liquid natural gas in Alaska, specific measures related to FEMA funding and California water supply, withdrawal of the US from the Paris Climate Agreement, implementation of tariffs on select countries and on select materials. So that is a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, with Canadian energy at 10%, so a little bit lower for energy. That's been delayed for 30 days. So we'll see if that comes back. Sure. Thank you. Tariff on China, which is active 10% on all goods, and a tariff on aluminum and steel at 25% for all nations beginning on March 12th. So that one's not in effect yet. And then there's another new one. This one's not yet on the staff report. This occurred on the 14th. There's an executive order to establish a energy dominance council to advise the president. This council would generate a report within 100 days with the recommendation to the president on how to rapidly and significantly increase electricity capacity. And they would consult with local, state, tribal governments and private sector to do that, and the DOE would be vice chair of that. So these actions are aiming to increase new energy development and exploration. Just a caveat there, for some of these actions, the definition of energy explicitly does not include solar and wind. Also looking to pause existing energy programs, such as the electric vehicle program, energy efficiency appliance standards, and the Inflation Reduction Act and Infrastructure Jobs and Investment Act. A lot of these measures have explicit mention of streamlining for oil and gas, geothermal, and hydropower, so it can help those sectors, and generally increase electricity capacity, which could be through generation or through transmission. And as for what they, so there's some other actions that aren't explicitly around the environment or energy and are more generally around government processes. We have a regulatory freeze, the federal funding freeze, Exploration of additional global supplemental tariffs on top of what I've already described. Recategorization of federal employees into political appointees. Renaming of US Digital Services to Department of Government Efficiency, which is DOGE. There's a removal, it's a 10 out, 1 in for every 1 new regulation. 10 must be rescinded or proposed to be rescinded. And then termination of federal DEI programs. There's also another one that's not listed on the staff report for February 18th to ensure accountability for all agencies. This would be a White House review of all proposed and final regulation for approval. And then creation of future performance standards for agencies by the White House. Installation of a White House liaison to independent agencies. And this is pretty heavily reported. President and Attorney General shall provide authoritative interpretations of law for the executive branch, which may or may not be interpreted as the executive branch having less response to the legislative branch. So, get into impact. I've already mentioned the new and existing offshore wind impacts. In conversations with the offshore wind industry, folks feel pretty optimistic that the federal portions of work that have to be done for our offshore wind deployment are done for the next 4 years. So there doesn't seem to be a cooling effect on the project very locally, but there might be on the rest of the industry. The funding freeze for EV programs and charging deployment, I know anecdotally that one CCA did lose grant funding for a project that they're working on here, although this shouldn't affect any of our EV deployments, or EV charging deployments. Of course, the freeze of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and IRA is going to have an effect on energy efficient appliances. This is some funding that layered really nicely with our previous DSM programs and with our incoming NREM programs. So this could lead to slower rollouts for customers there. And then there's a few different things that will affect the cost of energy and renewable deployment. So tariffs could increase imported energy prices from Canada and Mexico and could affect supply chain, resulting in slower timelines for construction. But permitting, on the other hand, could speed timelines up for new transmission and for new infrastructure development. The administration seems pretty friendly to geothermal and to hydropower. So we could see some increased development there. But we're not clear on how that's going to affect solar and wind. So. And then for funding, I did already mention the IRA and IIJA. I know that tariffs has been discussed a little bit here, so we have funding pause for that 88 million. And future applications might be less competitive due to the loss of DEI and justice for initiatives. I'm going to pause here and let Beth or Eileen add to the last 2 notes there.
Yeah, and I just want to cover this one because I think, you know, we're all probably well aware of a lot of the harms being done by this last bullet. I think, you know, that we have this like brief period of feeling like we might have increased competitiveness in our projects, kind of acknowledging, you know, the demographics of our region and the rural nature of our region, seeing, you know, we're like not only just like losing the competitive edge, but also I think there's just some, you know, tremendously discouraging and appalling language in these that are really harmful. And so, you know, it's difficult, you know, even the state ethics presentation that she had to put all this together and like go through these in detail one by one. I mean, it's a tough message when you have a mission like ours to, you know, decarbonize the energy sector and to, you know, really deeply pay attention to equity. It just feels really awful. So, you know, one message I've had for our staff and, you know, as Faith mentioned, you know, we're lucky that we don't have our day-to-day operations funded by federal funding. So we, you know, will absolutely maintain our commitment to DEI. This is not changing, you know, our values in any way. If anything, it's a sort of a call to double down. And similarly with our, you know, carbon reduction efforts, I think all the more timely and important. And, you know, I will say, I think we have the best staff here, you know, devoted to those goals and continuing to be devoted to that. But just some acknowledgement that, this is super hard and it's not fun to go through. And, you know, we are wanting to really also be, you know, cognizant of what all of our community is going through. It's not just the energy sector receiving these impacts. So as we reach out to partners in all kinds of different realms, you know, we're realizing like their worlds are kind of turned upside down. So we just want to have, be really aware of that as we do our work and be patient and, but, just again, really also devoted to our mission because it is so important. So just wanted to throw that out there. And we've definitely been, doing our best to convey that at our level to staff as well.
Thank you, Bob.
So going forward, we're doing some direct tracking. I mean, I've gone through all of these executive orders myself as an example. And then we are working with some coalitions to track and engage with the federal government. So California Community Choice Association, you hear a lot about RCEA. They're California's trade association for similar entities like ourselves. They, in the last couple of years, did have a federal legislation and executive tracking group. They would meet monthly. They've ramped up to meeting weekly, and they are now collaborating with LEAD, which is Local Energy Aggregation Network, which is a national nonprofit CCA outreach, market analysis, regulatory, legislative affairs, and funding group. So we're working with them to see if they want to become more involved or if there's letters that they can sign on to, or they also do a federal lobby day. There's also CCPC, which is the California Climate and Energy Collaborative. They are also hosting a weekly discussion group, and they have a federal tracker that they've developed that's also tracking court cases as well as executive orders. They are more focused on energy efficiency issues. So they collaborate quite a bit with RENs and other program implementers of that nature. Local Government Sustainable Energy Coalition is made up of a combination of cities and CCAs and regional energy network administrators. They're also similarly tracking things. And then there's a national association, the American Public Power Association, which also has some tracking. They were a wonderful resource in putting together this report looking at executive orders. So my question to you all is seeking some guidance on how often you'd like to hear updates like this one, and what level of engagement you're looking for from staff on these issues externally. And I'm also happy to answer any questions. No, it's a heavy one.
I do have a question about terrorists, right? That's the most immediate, right, in our face kind of issue. Is there any communication going on, like besides it's paused, but what do we expect? Is it just
So I will say officially, they are not allowed to communicate with us. But that we have been very strategic in sending weekly emails, and we are getting responses. The responses are we can't respond, but we're like poking to see if our staff is still there. And our attorney outside counsel that is helping is hearing that they're getting ready to start reopening conversations at Department of Energy. We, the staff level and with our partners are continuing the work. So we haven't paused, and we're hoping to still meet all of our deadlines that we had prior to the pause as a way to show good faith effort. In addition, we're reaching out to other awardees. So we've been meeting with the CEC. They were awarded a $400 million funding allocation from the same topic 3 area that we were, and we're discussing what they're doing, and they are well aware of our project and hoping to uplift, and in any of their communication they may have more resources than we do. We poke them as much as we can.
I'd like to also offer that there's potentially on March 25th, Eileen, as a result of today's meeting with the Tribal Clean Energy Group. There may be a trip to Washington, DC, where a delegation of our local team would be able to go and do some direct pitches. Also just uplifting that the team has been really active with engaging Senator Schiff and Padilla as well as Congressman Huffman. They're very concerned about these projects and through their influence, but we realize that we need a bipartisan support. So part of the project is in Siskiyou County, where Republican Congressman Doug Moffett is. And so the Quorum tribe is exploring their relationship with him and then asked to support this project. And then I'll just finish by saying that parallel to not giving up hope and not giving up focus of accountability to the feds, we are also simultaneously really talking with CEC and the California Natural Resources Agency about Prop 4, the climate bond, and about how potentially the tariffs could be funded or made whole, if you will, through the climate bond if the feds do not, in our opinion, meet their obligation to execute a fully executed agreement. And just thank you to RCEA, your guys' staff, Lexi, Faith, and you. It's so hard, I can't see yours. They've just been wonderful champions, and then, you know, the other 3 tribes, it's taken a toll on morale in a really significant way. So just, we're trying to stay strong for one another. We're trying to turn over every rock of possibility. Thank you.
Oh, Scott.
Yeah.
So, the question that was asked, and I can only speak as an alternate, but the question that was asked was from the board was whether they wanted to have more updates of these things. If I was on this board more often, I would want more updates, as painful as they are. Yeah.
I just want to interject. So
Yeah.
our general cadence for policy updates is quarterly, just for some context.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. I would say that in a time of extreme flux, you may want to consider taking some discretion or offering some discretion to the executive director about that cadence or when it comes, because there may be some more significant changes. And also, as painful as it is, when you're speaking to the concept of are there opportunities within that space to do things you need to do and that may be a hard conversation to have with this board, just as it was around taking the credits for nuclear power or whatever it may be. There just may be some moral and some discussions around what, you know, what an organization like this does, especially when we're talking about engaging in the upgrades for energy transmission projects, I would say, or at least an energy transmission policy, which is really such a huge part of this that may be advancing quicker than renewable energy itself in the next few years. I thought those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and just to add, like, for which again, way smaller group, way less budget, way different, but our Equity Arcata board has like decided to just keep an item on our agenda to talk about, you know, the changing landscape of things, if there are updates that need to be brought to that group. And I think that could be, you know, kind of similar situation here, or house it, you know, kind of under a staff report or something, but to be able to be nimble and keep us aware of what's going on, you know, if there is something big that changes that is influencing these larger contracts we're in, or, you know, how we could, you know, if there are opportunities for engaging on things like transmission, whatever upgrades, you know, how we can both work as advocates and also work in tandem with what is going to be happening, because it is changing every single day.
Yeah, and I'd say I agree with both of you. I asked the city, our city manager to put a standing item. You know, even though like we don't directly receive funds, there's a lot of pass-through money, right? Through DHHS, all these things, and so yeah, maybe there won't be things to talk about, but the reality is for the next 6 months, we're gonna be talking about this. We don't have a choice, like we have to understand what's going on at that level. It affects us in way more than at the city level, even, you know, I mean, I'm talking about wholesale change of energy policy at the federal level, so I support keeping it as a standing item for a while.
And kind of just as an add-on, I would advise if, like, there are board members here today, I assume, and that are also part of other organizations, that if we hear things, you know, like I'm part of Civic Well, and we're having our policymakers conference in Yosemite in March, which you're all invited to go to. It's amazing, super, great, but it's, all the state resource and folks are gonna be, I think people are gonna be there, but then also the organization Climate Mayor, which I'm also involved in, I'm mayor, but I track that organization, which also follows these in a nationwide basis. So if you're part of other organizations that track this, I would say forward whatever maybe news you can to staff, even though it might be repetitive, nuggets are there.
Anyone else? Thank you, Faith. For the
Thank you.
information.
Yeah.
Painful. It's vital.
Keep her happy light on after doing all that work.
Yeah, anyone from the public here,
Nothing online.
okay, no lines. We'll go to item 10, staff report, executive director report.
Thank you. Yeah, I have just a few updates I want to share. I'm closing in on my second month. So it's, it feels pretty good. I still, continue to receive just a tremendous amount of support from staff. Just seeing the reports that are so well prepared here, it gives me so much pride, and they really, work wonderfully. I have completed internal discussions and interviews with every single staff member at this point, and the directors, the internal directors. I've also done several board member one-on-one conversations. I've got a couple of more of those scheduled. If you haven't scheduled one, you'd like to reach out to myself or to Lori T. She will help us get those on the books. It's really been helpful, from both the staff and board perspective, to kind of just get the baseline and help me get acquainted. It's sort of, my own onboarding process I'm going through. So happy to do more of those. We've also had the opportunity to do a number of board orientations with the new members and several new alternates. So also, if you know that your alternate has not taken advantage of that, it's happy to schedule something to get those done. They're really helpful, and had some new conversations there too. And then wanted to also, switching gears, mention that based on the motion from last month, Sherry Wu is our vice chair. I'd like to thank her for being willing to do that. And she's been contacted and is more than happy to take on that role. And I think you've heard it alluded to a couple of times that that we want to do a deep dive kind of study session on affordability. We'll also include the PCIA in that. We're targeting the April board meeting for that. So it'd be regular time. We will still likely have like a consent agenda, but we're trying to hold off on any other major agenda items to really take that time to look into a whole slew of affordability issues. So we want to have kind of a bit of a program related to that. We'll also use that as an opportunity to give like kind of a comprehensive update from each director, internal RCEA staff directors from our different departments to kind of just summarize what they've been up to in their department, kind of accomplishments from last year and big ticket items moving forward. We did this at the staff meeting when I first came on board, and it's pretty powerful, I think, to listen to it in that really rapid succession, fast way, because I think, at the board meetings, we get little snippets from each program at different meetings at different times. So it really is kind of take home of the broad work that we're accomplishing. And along those lines, I'm talking about an affordability, workshop coming up. One thing I've gotten to look at since I've been on staff at RCEA is every month they do a call log summarizing all the calls that come into the office. And I wanted to share some of this information because it's really, I think, highlights sort of a different perspective than sometimes what we get at the meetings, like at the CAC meetings or board meetings. We took in 131 phone calls in the month of January. And we had, the bulk of those being related, well over half, to concerns about their bill. homes, specifically, high billing. And one thing I want to really highlight out of this one, so 25 people called and said they wanted to opt out because the bill was essentially too high or for whatever reason. And just on the education our staff was able to provide, 20 of those 25 folks just stayed in. They're like, oh, I get it. So it really is just demonstrating that power of conversation. And, once people have more information, most of them don't see that benefit of opting out. So I just wanted to highlight that good work that your staff does to take these calls and really work with the customers one by one, very, very deliberately, making sure their issues are addressed. And so I wanted to share that because I don't know if that, always makes it here. But super proud that staff is able to, have that educational capacity and let people know exactly what's going on with their bill. So yeah, looking forward to April when we can deep dive into all of that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that we'll be bringing back the weighted voting item that was pulled from the consent agenda last month. Director Arroyo is out. She was the one who pulled it, and she is out on a mandatory Coast Guard duty. So she'll be back next month. And so we wanted to wait till we can have that full discussion. So we've got, and we'll also have the benefit of Nancy's input on that. Just let everyone know we haven't forgotten it. It's coming back. So that's all the updates from me.
All right, any questions? All right. Yeah. All right, item 11, future agenda items. Does anyone have anything? Okay, well, next meeting will be Thursday, March 27th, 3:30 at the Worthing Building here. Motion to adjourn.
So they do that here.